They didn't expect to survive the night. 6 elite Navy SEALs, trapped in a freezing mountain basin, pinned by hostile fire, their comms down, and a blizzard closing in. Frostbite already setting in, one man unconscious, and no one even knew where they were. Their last hope? A broken emergency transmitter, and a single SOS signal fired blind into the snow. It should have vanished, but somewhere across the mountains, someone saw it. Not a squad, not a unit, just one woman, a retired Navy SEAL sniper, wrapping gifts for her kids on Christmas Eve. And without hesitation, she dropped everything, geared up, and walked into the storm alone. What happened over the next 4 hours would turn her into the only reason 6 combat veterans lived to see Christmas lights again. Before we show you exactly how she took down the ambush, pulled 6 half-frozen men out of the snow, and changed everything they believed about sacrifice, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Tap like, hit subscribe, and turn on that bell icon, because this one's for anyone who believes the mission doesn't end just because you're home. The snow crunched underfoot like broken glass. 6 Navy SEALs moved in a staggered line across a windswept ridge in the Karakoram foothills, heads down, rifles slung tight against their chests. Their breath misted out into the cold dusk, instantly vanishing into the whitewash of an incoming storm. High above them, the peaks burned soft orange with the last light of December 24th. Chief Daniel Rourke paused at a shallow overhang, holding up one gloved fist. The team stopped behind him without a word. Below, the terrain dropped into a glacier-cut valley lined with black rock and snowdrifts deep enough to swallow a truck. "Final hold point before we start our descent tomorrow," Rourke said quietly, scanning with his monocular. Still no movement. "Meyer, relay our position." The youngest of them, Petty Officer Meyer, barely 23 and always smiling, nodded and keyed his radio. "Command, this is Echo Patrol. Last position marked. No contact. Visibility dropping. Wind picking up. Final push begins at 600. Over." Only static came back. Meyer frowned and resent the message. This time, a faint garble answered before cutting out completely. "Signals bouncing off the walls again," he muttered. "Probably the storm." "Then we're done transmitting until daylight," Rourke said. "Set camp, everyone hydrate, eat something warm, and check your boots for frost build." The SEALs began their practice setup. Snow walls for wind protection, 2-man tents pressed low into the rock, gear sorted with mechanical precision. A small chemical stove hissed to life behind a pack shield, warming a pot of electrolyte broth that tasted like salt and copper. They were tired. This was day 7 of their Overwatch mission, monitoring a suspected smuggling corridor at 11,000 feet. No confirmed contact, just long hours, cold muscles, and a lot of waiting. But tomorrow was Christmas Day, and if they started at first light, they'd reach the pickup point by mid-afternoon. No one wanted to miss home. Corpsman Delaney, always the sarcastic one, clipped a small string of red and green LED lights between 2 trekking poles above the stove. "There," he grinned. "Holiday morale package courtesy of Amazon Prime." Laughter cut through the cold for a moment, then it faded. Because the wind had shifted. A sharp gust pushed through camp, colder than before. Rourke stood still, listening. Somewhere behind the distant howl of the storm, a sound echoed, low, irregular, metallic. "Anyone else hear that?" he asked. The others paused. One shook his head. Another said, "Just the wind playing tricks." But Rourke wasn't so sure. He looked out across the valley again, eyes narrowing against the dark. "Keep your rifles close tonight," he said. And no one asked why. The attack didn't begin with bullets. It began with a sound, low, thunderous, and wrong. Chief Rourke sat up just as the mountainside above them groaned. A fraction of a second later, the snow moved. "Avalanche!" someone shouted. But the warning was already late. A wall of packed snow and broken ice tore down the ridge, slamming into their position with shocking speed. It wasn't a full slide, more like a triggered displacement, just enough to destroy cover, scatter gear, and disorient everyone in its path. Tents vanished. The Christmas lights snapped and blew apart in a tangle of red and green sparks. Delaney was thrown backward, slammed into a rock with a thud that knocked the air from his lungs. Then came the gunfire, not panic fire, not scattered shots, disciplined volleys cutting through the whiteout like a scythe. Suppressed, yes, but tight, timed, coordinated. Someone up there had thermal optics and knew exactly where they were. Move! Downhill! Rourke bellowed, hauling Meyer to his feet. Two SEALs tried to push east, but a burst of fire raked the snow in front of them. One cried out, tumbling sideways, hit in the thigh. The other dragged him back behind a jagged outcrop, returning fire blind into the storm. The wind was howling now, 40 knots and climbing. Visibility, maybe 10 feet, tops. Rourke tried his long-range radio. Nothing. Switched to short band. Static. The cold was killing everything. Batteries, optics, even voices. Shouts were swallowed whole by the wind. They knew our route, Delaney growled, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. They were waiting. Rourke cursed under his breath. This wasn't some lucky ambush by insurgents or smugglers. This was deliberate. Whoever was up there had studied their movement pattern, predicted their rest point, and timed the storm. Another burst of fire. Close. They were being herded. Down the gully! Go now! Rourke ordered. They moved fast as they could through waist-deep powder, stumbling over rocks and buried debris. The slope narrowed, funneled, curved, until suddenly it dropped into a shallow ice basin. Smooth walls, one exit, and the enemy didn't follow. They just stopped firing and vanished. Trap, Delaney said, immediately panting. They pushed us here on purpose. Rourke nodded grimly. Worse than a kill zone. It's a freezer. Wind can't escape. Neither can we. The cold hit them like a second wave. No more cover, no radio, one injured, wind speed rising, temperatures falling fast. They tried to huddle behind their packs, but the chill sank straight through their layers. Hands began to shake, feet started to lose feeling, breath grew shallow. We're not making it till morning, Meyer whispered. Rourke looked up into the screaming white sky, then down at his team. Survival first, he said quietly. Stay awake. Share warmth. We wait it out. But even as he spoke, he could feel it already. The cold was winning. The cold didn't just hurt. It stole. Slowly, methodically, starting with the smallest things. First went their fingertips. Rourke watched Meyer rub his gloves together again and again, trying to coax feeling back into fingers that had turned an unnatural shade of gray. Frostbite was settling in. Not later, not overnight, but now. This basin was a natural wind trap. Every gust seemed to come from a different angle, slicing through their layers and sucking heat from their bones. Delaney pulled at the zipper of his parka, trying to seal a gap near his neck. His hands shook so violently he missed 3 times before he got it. Feels like breathing ice, he muttered through chattering teeth. It did. Each inhale burned. Each exhale left a thin crust of frost along the inside of their balaclavas. Even speech felt heavy, slurred. Cold didn't care how tough you were. Cold didn't negotiate. Rourke forced himself to stay focused. Cycle movement. Now, everyone. Wiggle your toes. Move your fingers. Rotate your shoulders. Keep blood flowing. They obeyed, but weakly. The storm was too strong. Muscles stiffened faster than they could warm them. A thermal blanket ripped free of its anchor point, flapping into the storm before any of them could react. Meyer slumped back against a rock, his eyes half-lidded. My daughter's making cookies tonight, he whispered. I told her I'd help with the gingerbread men. Hey, Rourke grabbed his shoulder, forcing his head up. Stay with me, kid. I'm trying, Chief, Meyer breathed. But everything feels slow. Not good. That was the hypothermia talking. Stage 2. Above them, faint shapes moved along the ridge, shadows pacing, repositioning, enemies watching the storm do their work for them, waiting, listening, predators in parkas. Delaney aimed upward, then lowered his rifle. Can't see a damn thing. Scope's frozen. Do they plan on coming down? They don't need to, Rourke said. Not until we stop breathing. A harsh truth, delivered flat. Another SEAL, Hale, tried to load a fresh magazine, but his hands were too numb. He fumbled it twice before Delaney gently took over. Rourke checked his team. One by one, faces pale, lips blue, coordination dropping. Every minute they stayed here increased their risk of unconsciousness, cardiac arrhythmia, or worse. They could no longer rely on movement to stay alive. "We need rescue," Hale murmured, "but Command doesn't even know we went off-route." "And nobody knows this basin exists," Delaney added. Rourke looked at the last functional piece of equipment they had, the burst transmitter, its casing cracked, battery half dead from the cold. It was a stupid chance, a desperate chance, but it was something. "If we hit it during a break in the wind," he whispered, "we might get one pulse out." Hale frowned. "To who? Who's even listening tonight?" Rourke didn't answer, because he didn't know, but he also knew this. If they didn't try something, anything, they'd be dead within the hour. The wind dipped, just barely, just long enough for the world to sound like itself again. Rourke felt the lull before he heard it, a thin pocket of calmer air slicing through the chaos. "Now," he said, give me the transmitter." Delaney handed it over, his hands trembling too violently to operate it himself. The device was old, an emergency burst communicator normally used for aviation crashes or mountain extractions. Half its casing was cracked. Frost rimmed the edges of the battery slot. Rourke pointed it toward the sky, thumb hovering over the trigger. "Come on, he muttered. "Just one signal. One." He pressed. The transmitter sparked. A weak flickering pulse shot upward, swallowed instantly by swirling snow. The tiny indicator light blinked once, again, then faded to black as the battery finally froze. And that was it. No sound, no confirmation, no promise it reached anyone at all. The SEALs watched the dead device in silence. "It didn't send," Meyer whispered. "Maybe it did," Rourke said, though even he didn't believe it. Someone might have caught it. But who? These mountains were a dead zone in a storm like this. No aircraft could fly. No ground team would be anywhere near. And the Navy had no active units close enough to triangulate a fragmented distress beacon. They were alone. Totally, completely alone. Rourke lowered the transmitter, heart sinking. Above them, the shadows on the ridge shifted again, waiting. Cut 2. 300 miles away. A warm living room glowed gold with Christmas lights. Stockings hung crookedly over a fireplace. The smell of gingerbread drifted from the kitchen. Lieutenant Commander Mara Keats knelt beside her youngest son, helping him tie a ribbon around a small gift. Off duty for almost a year now, she'd learned to embrace the quiet rhythms of home. School pickups, cookie trays, holiday crafts. Her sniper rifle case sat dusty in the garage. She hadn't touched it since leaving the teams. A timer chimed from the kitchen, but another sound beat it, a sharp metallic click from the shelf above the fireplace. Mara straightened instantly. Her old emergency receiver, an encrypted analog relic the Navy had once issued her for remote Overwatch missions, was glowing. Not steady, not clean, but pulsing irregularly with a corrupted distress signal. Her daughter frowned. "Mom? Is that from your work?" Mara didn't answer. She crossed the room in 3 strides and lifted the device. The code was fragmented, scrambled by storm interference. But the coordinate base pattern, she knew it. Knew the corridor, knew the altitude, knew the signature of a SEAL team trying to whisper for help through a mountain that wanted them dead. Her husband stepped into the doorway. "Mara, you're not thinking." "I have to go," she said, grabbing her coat. "Someone out there doesn't have an hour left." She kissed her children once, then ran for the door, Christmas behind her, death waiting ahead. Mara moved like a machine, down the hallway, into the garage, every step calculated, every second borrowed from someone else's life. She threw open the gear locker she hadn't touched in nearly a year. First came the core layers, moisture-wicking thermal base, second skin cold suit, wind-sealed parka, then the load-bearing belt, avalanche beacon, med kit, anti-fog goggles, crampons. Her long case rifle waited at the back, sealed in vacuum plastic, preserved like an heirloom. She tore it open without hesitation. Mara's husband stood in the doorway, arms folded but voice soft. "This storm's not survivable." "I know," she said. "You're not military anymore." "I know that too." He stepped forward, eyes searching hers. "Then why go?" She met his gaze. No drama, no explanation. "Because they won't last till morning, and I might be the only shot they have." He didn't stop her again. As she loaded the rifle, carbon barrel, thermal insulated housing, sub-zero bolt carrier. Her daughter peeked in, wide-eyed and hugging a gingerbread man. Will you be home for Christmas? Mara didn't lie. If I can. The girl stepped forward, held something out, a small paper star. It's for your backpack, she said, so you don't get lost. Mara took it carefully, gently affixed it to a strap on her ruck, then knelt, hugged her once. I'll follow this all the way home. Outside, wind clawed at the siding. Snow was falling sideways, thick as paint. Mara loaded her gear into the truck, fired the engine. GPS showed the nearest road access, still clear, barely. She had a 6-hour radius before conditions made the mountain impassable. She drove hard. Wind buffeted the windshield. Wipers struggled. The heater fought to keep her fingers pliable. Every curve in the road demanded full attention. Ice patches blinked by in the dark. 30 miles in, the snow swallowed the road. That was as far as rubber would take her. She stepped out, slammed the tailgate, threw the pack over her shoulders. Her breath steamed into the dark like smoke from a flare. Then she turned toward the ridge, 11,000 feet of bitter silence, and began the climb. Each step sunk knee-deep. Her boots were made for this. Her legs were trained for worse. Every muscle in her body still remembered what it meant to survive in sub-zero mountain warfare, but that didn't make it easier. She walked headfirst into a wind that screamed, not for glory, not for pay, but because 6 men she'd never met were dying somewhere out there, and no one else was coming. She adjusted her sling, checked her compass, and whispered through clenched teeth, "Hold on, boys, I'm coming." The world narrowed to one boot print at a time. Mara climbed steadily, knees screaming with every step as snow surged against her thighs. Wind battered the side of her face, dragging her breath sideways in bursts of steam. She ditched the road hours ago. Now it was just mountain, storm, and silence, except it wasn't silent. Not to her. She crouched beside a drift near a ridge break, her gloved hand sweeping snow aside in practiced arcs. The crystals weren't shaped right, loose on top, but compacted underneath. Not natural compression, weight. She dug gently until she found it. An imprint. The heel of a tactical boot. Her heart kicked once. She followed the print upslope, eyes scanning for the next marker. Disturbed branches, snow scarring, even the faint scuff of a crampon edge dragging through crust. Half the trail was gone, buried in whiteout. But Mara had hunted people in the Hindu Kush in conditions worse than this. She paused at a narrowing in the path, took shelter behind a wind-sheltered rock, and opened her thermal monocular. Nothing. Too much glare. The storm was thick enough to create false ghosts in her lens. She lowered it, trusted her eyes instead. Then she saw it. A faint smear ahead in the drift, too long for wildlife. She approached carefully, knelt, and pulled free a glove, half buried in the snow. Navy issue. Black stitching. Still warm, still recent. She continued upward, blood humming in her ears now, every muscle focused, breath paced. She was close. Then, new tracks, heavy, offset, stride pattern uneven. These weren't SEALs, riflemen, 3 of them, maybe 4, boots too wide for mountain units, probably mercenaries or paramilitary contractors. She knew the type, cold weather gear, but no discipline. The kind of men who hunted by numbers and waited for their prey to stop breathing. They were following someone. Mara picked up her pace, scanning sidewalls, taking in the terrain like a sniper reading wind. This slope curved west. She'd patrolled it years ago. Natural basin below, a low point, wind funneled in, couldn't escape. A trap. She climbed higher and took cover behind a jagged black rock. Wind clawed at her, but she pressed flat, pulled out her thermal optics again, waited for distortion to settle, tuned out the storm. Then, heat. 6 faint signatures slumped low, all motionless or barely moving. She adjusted her scope again. 3 more, circling, higher, alert. Clean arcs, moving between ledges. They were waiting, watching, letting the cold do the killing. Her pulse slowed. Her jaw locked. There was no time to call for help. She shifted, unpacked her rifle, lay prone in the snow, and began aligning her scope. There were 2 kinds of shooters in this world, those who fired when the shot presented itself, and those who built their own shot out of nothing. Mara had always been the second kind, and she wasn't going to miss. The snow barely stirred when she went prone. Mara lay in the white like she was born for it, chest pressed against the earth, elbows anchored in powder, her rifle nestled in the crook of her shoulder. Breath slow, eyes unblinking. The storm raged, but she had already stopped hearing it. Her cheek rested against the stock. The trigger nestled beneath her glove. She wasn't looking for silhouettes or faces. She was watching for a thermal bloom, shape distortion, and melt lines in snow. A shimmer to the left, elevated, not moving much. That meant he was watching. Holding position. That meant confidence. Good. Makes him easier to hit. She adjusted for the wind. 9 clicks left. Dropped the elevation 2 marks. The bullet would bleed velocity in this cold, but she'd accounted for that when she packed custom rounds that stayed stable at -30. Her heart beat once, then again, then nothing. Shot 1. A suppressed crack. A blur. And then the shimmer vanished. Not dropped. Erased. Down in the basin, the slumped heat signatures didn't react. Too far gone. But the 2 remaining hostiles above twitched. One ducked. The other turned sharply, unsure of what had happened. Mara was already moving, rolling right, hugging the terrain, dragging the rifle with her. 30 feet over, she braced again. Reacquired. Shot 2. The man had stepped forward, rifle raised, trying to find a target. Mara found him first. The round struck center mass. He folded without sound. The last one panicked. She saw him in her lens, pivoting, bolting downslope, radio to mouth, but he didn't know the terrain like she did. He dropped behind a rock ledge, thinking it would shield him. It didn't. Shot 3. She aimed at the snow next to the rock, not at him, but where his heat had softened the drift. The round punched through, fracturing ice on impact, striking him just as he leaned out to peek. He slumped sideways, but she wasn't done. Movement, lower ridge. A 4th? No. A runner. One of them had waited, hidden, and was now retreating down the far trail, trying to vanish into the storm. He almost made it. Shot 4. 700 yards, wind angled right, visibility trash. She counted 3 seconds, then fired. The runner dropped mid-stride. No cry, no spasm, just a shape. Stopping. The basin went still. Mara remained prone, scanning, counting. 1 minute, 2, nothing. The shooters were down. The basin was silent. She exhaled for the first time in 4 minutes. Her breath fogged the scope lens, and she didn't even care. She folded the bipod, packed the rifle, and stood. Not because it was over, but because the dying hadn't stopped yet. They were still in that basin, and now it was time to bring them back. Chief Rourke heard something. Not wind, not gunfire. A shift. A thud. Distant. Muted by snow. He forced his head up, neck stiff, muscles aching from stillness. His eyelids peeled apart, crusted with frost. The world had gone blurry and blue. A shape moved at the edge of the basin. He blinked. Was it real? Around him the others barely stirred. Hale was lying on his side, breathing shallow. Delaney mumbled nonsense, his words slurred and looping. Meyer wasn't moving at all. His lips had turned violet. Too long, too cold, too late. Rourke slumped again, and then boots in the snow. Heavy, steady, confident. A figure dropped into the basin like a shadow returning to its shape. She moved fast, no hesitation, no wasted motion. Straight to him. He felt a hand slap his cheek twice. Daniel, stay awake. You're not dying tonight. He blinked, vision sharpening just enough to see her face. Mara? She didn't answer. She was already unzipping his parka, shoving a chemical heater under each arm, then pressing one against his lower back. She pulled a thermal pack from her belt, cracked it hard between her palms, shoved it down his collar. Eyes open, she said, voice calm and surgical. Stay with me. She moved to Delaney next, stripped his gloves, checked his pulse, then yanked a tourniquet off his belt and wrapped it around his arm. Not for bleeding, but to help redirect blood flow to his core. Smart, precise, no theatrics. Hale was seizing, slow, shivering spasms. Mara ripped open a foil pack, poured a hot liquid concentrate into a flexible pouch, and forced it between his lips. Small sips, she muttered. Don't choke. Then to Meyer, too still. She knelt beside him, tilted his head, opened his mouth. No breath fog, but shallow pulse. Still alive, barely. She pulled her own parka halfway off and wrapped it around him, tucking the collar beneath his chin, then back to Rourke. You with me? He nodded weakly. I don't understand. How? No time, she said, pulling another heat wrap from her belt. They're down, but the cold's not. You've got maybe 20 minutes before your organs give up. We climb or you don't wake up. Rourke looked at her, really looked. Frost on her lashes, dried blood near her ear, a paper star soaked through, dangling from her rucksack strap. You came, he whispered. She didn't smile, just moved to strap Meyer to her harness. I told my kids I'd be home for Christmas, she said quietly, but not without you. And with that, she pulled the first man to his feet. The fight wasn't over. But now they had a chance. The mountain didn't care who had a rifle. It didn't care who was trained, or who had survived the ambush, or who was trying to leave alive. It only cared about cold, and weight, and gravity. Mara clipped a red chem light to the tip of her collapsed rifle and cracked it with one hand. Then jammed her avalanche beacon into the snowpack and triggered the emergency broadcast. It pulsed instantly, a shortwave ping screaming upward to search and rescue command. A weak signal, but enough. Her headset chirped once, distorted but real. Rescue ETA, 40 minutes, hold your position. She almost laughed. They wouldn't survive 40 minutes. Mara spun back toward the team. All 6 were still alive, but just barely. Hale was shaking so hard he could barely sit up. Meyer's breathing was shallow and slowing. Delaney had stopped talking. Get up, she barked. Everyone! Only Rourke responded, dragging himself upright. They can't move, he croaked. They'll die if they don't. She opened her last set of chemical warmers and shoved one into each groin, each armpit, where blood flowed closest to the skin. Her hands moved fast, precise. She gave each of them 100 million caffeine tablets to kickstart heart rate, forced electrolyte fluid down their throats, and wrapped her own extra layers around the worst cases. Then she started building a drag harness, belts, compression cords, one thermal blanket shredded into strips. She anchored Meyer to herself, looping his dead weight behind her like a sled. You lead them, she told Rourke. I'll take the haul. And with that, they moved, 1 foot, then another, uphill. The climb out of the basin felt like scaling a vertical grave. Snow crumbled beneath their boots. Gusts knocked them sideways. At one point, Hale collapsed again. Mara caught him with one hand, while keeping Meyer's harness balanced with the other. Halfway up, the snow shifted. It was a sound no one ever forgets, a deep crack, like the mountain itself had just snapped a bone. Move! She screamed. Now! They sprinted, or stumbled, or crawled, just seconds before a wave of loose snow dropped behind them, burying half the basin in icy rubble. She didn't look back, didn't breathe until they cleared the lip, and then, finally, rotor wash. The helicopter's spotlight cut through the storm like a star descending. Red and white light danced across snow. Mara collapsed to one knee and raised her chem light. The signal pulsed once, twice, and the bird began its final descent. Rourke dropped beside her, coughing blood into the snow. We're gonna make it? Mara didn't answer. She was already pulling Meyer's harness free, readying him for medics. She didn't cry, didn't shake, but as the doors opened and hands reached out, she gripped the last man's wrist and refused to let go until every one of them was inside. The helicopter throbbed with heat and noise inside the red-lit cabin. Medics moved like surgeons in a war zone, cutting frozen uniforms, pushing heated IV bags into blue-veined arms, checking pupils with clipped urgency. But no one was screaming. No one was coding, because they'd all made it. Barely. Chief Rourke sat hunched over, shivering uncontrollably, his eyes fixed on nothing. A space blanket crackled around his shoulders. Across from him, Hale and Delaney lay with oxygen masks strapped to their faces, their chests rising slow but steady. Myers' head rested in Mara's lap. She hadn't moved since they lifted off. Her parka was still half open, heat packs tucked into her sides to warm the boy. Her eyes stayed on the window, frosted glass, streaked with condensation and snowmelt. The medic tapped her arm. "Ma'am, we need to check your core temp." She waved him off. Later, another minute passed in silence, then Rourke lifted his head. His voice rasped, barely audible. "You saved Christmas." Mara didn't look at him. Her thumb brushed a line of melted frost from Myers' brow. "No," she said softly. "You boys did. I just made sure you got to see it." Outside the window, the blizzard had begun to clear. Through a break in the cloud line, distant villages dotted the mountain's shadow with pinpricks of yellow and red. Christmas lights strung across rooftops, flickering candles in windows, a silent world below, unaware that 6 seals had nearly frozen to death trying to make it home. Mara leaned back, her head thumping lightly against the cold, metal wall of the bird. She'd kept the promise, not the one to the Navy, the one to her daughter, because that paper star still clung to her shoulder strap, soaked, wrinkled, edges curled by wet snow, but still there, still shining. And this year, Christmas didn't come from stockings or trees or music. It came from 6 men, half dead in the snow, who refused to quit, and a woman who refused to leave them behind. If you saw that SOS signal flash across your screen, would you have gone into the storm like Mara did? And what do you think truly helped them survive out there? Years of SEAL training, or the will to see Christmas one more time? Drop your answer in the comments, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss these true stories of military courage. Share this one with someone who knows that heroes don't always come home from war, but sometimes they come back for each other. And while you're here, those other videos appearing on your screen, watch those next. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with a brand new story.